What is up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of Destination the Show. This is episode 108. My name is Jamie Cameron, joined from the frigid, frozen tundra by Jeremy Nygaard. Staying
It's true.
warm over there, buddy?
I am. It's funny because everybody, the running joke in the Midwest is when it's really cold, people say, "Well, it wouldn't feel so cold if it wasn't for the wind," right?
Yeah.
And we did the 40 below wind chills in very very cold air temperature with a little wind.
Yep.
Yesterday morning was the coldest day because it was god awful windy and it was unbearable. Like today in the sun and the negative 15 just felt great.
It felt great.
And so we're now in the part of the winter where when you like where your eyes don't freeze shut, it's like, oh, yeah, we can live in this. And
Yeah.
I hate it. I hate every second of it.
I do too, man. I'm getting fatigued of this long cold snap. Like my kids' school had off Monday and Tuesday anyway, and then they tacked on that negative 45 wind chill day on Friday. So kids have been home for 5 days.
And you're
Chaos
loving
in the
it.
cities. I'm not loving anything at the moment.
Yeah,
um,
I was on my way to Meltdown Saturday. I'm going anyway. And then it's like, yeah, it was the right choice. I get it, but
totally.
I wasn't afraid for my safety in that part of Minneapolis at that point in time. But
Yep.
man, it's a weird world we live in.
It is. It is a weird world we live in. We hope that we can provide some lighthearted baseball distraction for folks in what's been a pretty grueling, I think it's fair to say, month of January for the weather for, the federal occupation and many other reasons. But let's dig in some housekeeping stuff, then we'll jump into all the things. So ways that you can support the show, if you'd be so kind, like and subscribe on your preferred podcast platform of choice. You can find all of our stuff on YouTube. The handle there is at Destination the Show. If you got questions, you can send them our way. The handles are Twitter at DTS_pod1, Blue Sky at Destination the Show, or you can email us, destinationtheshow@gmail.com. I'm really excited for today's conversation, actually, Jeremy. I got to say, I haven't felt as much like talking baseball recently, but today I'm kind of fired up for it. We are going to talk about and react to Twins placement on top 100 lists. And I really feel like that is a springboard for us to do our own rankings and get geared up for spring training and all the things. So that should be really fun. Before we do that, we should talk about a trade that was official today. The Twins DFA'd Pearson Ole and traded him and Edouard Julien to the Colorado Rockies, of all teams, for Jace Kaminska. Kaminska is a right-handed pitcher taken in the 10th round of the 2023 draft, listed at 6'2", 235. He's 24. Last pitched in A-ball in 2024. Missed all of 2025, having undergone TJ surgery, but at low A in 2024, he was really good as a starter. 87.1 innings pitched, 278 ERA, 313 FIP, struck out 29.5% of hitters, 3.4% walk rate, which is ridiculous. 1.24 per nine, mostly fastball, curveball guy. Sure, the Twins, maybe it's one of those guys where they liked him in the middle rounds in the 2023 draft and just didn't get a shot. But what did you make of this trade and the beginning of the thinning of the Twins 40 man a little bit and some of their crunches? Not really.
Well, and that's kind of the weird thing because the roster makeup as it is weird.
Very weird.
And so Eddie Julian was going to serve as a backup that was out of options and wasn't really backing up the spots that required backups, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we assume Luke Keishel's going to be the everyday second baseman. Brooks Lee is going to be the everyday shortstop who can also play second base. There are some other guys on the roster that can play second base, so it makes sense that he's expendable because I feel like in a month or 6 weeks, I guess 2 months, he was going to be off the roster anyway. Pearson was DFA'd. My question at the time for you, and I saw Nick Nelson tweet basically the same thing today, questioning why Pearson Ole was essentially guy number 40 on the 40 man.
Yeah.
So what was you? I mean, just share, I guess, your explanation for that.
I mean, I think it's fair to question the like order of operations and were there guys that you might have ditched off the roster sooner. If you're looking at getting rid of a pitcher, which I suppose is where people's kind of puzzlement arose from, it was probably between him and Travis Adams. We can remember that last year the Twins protected Travis Adams from the Rule 5 draft and not Pearson Ole, so that's maybe our kind of first clue there. And I just did some comparing in my head between those two guys, not necessarily Ole against bats, which I think is more your question, but it's a fastball that really lived around 91, 92 in the majors, and it's a really good like parachutey type changeup. But there's not much more beyond that. And so my supposition was like the Twins don't think this is going to be viable for them, given some of the parameters of their roster, given how many really good young arms they have that may factor into the bullpen. And so there was no possibility of him kind of finding a long-term home with the Twins. We had a brief conversation about like, if you pick between Adams and Ole, who would you choose? And I said Adams just because a little bit more velocity upside and a little bit more arsenal to play with. I think like probably neither is where you want to be if you have a really, really good major league bullpen. But I certainly think you can kind of question the order. And there are so many guys on the kind of fringes of the roster, bats really, that like, I'm like, what position are you playing and who are you platooning with? And I've just kind of removed myself from it a bit because I'm just assuming that there's going to be more moves made here that will bring the actual supposed 2026 roster into a little bit greater refine for us.
Yeah, and I think, just to get into the numbers of that, if we assume a lineup looks something like Jeffers, Bell, Keishel, Lee, Lewis, Buxton, Wallner, Larnick, that leaves five more roster spots, right? Mm-hmm. And right now we have 2 more catchers. Austin Martin.
Wait, who's 2 more catchers?
So the new guy that signed is Caratini.
Caratini, yep.
And Alex Jackson.
Oh, that's right. Yep.
And then Austin Martin, Cody Clemens, James Altman, and then 3 other guys they've recently picked up: Wagaman, Tristan Gray, Ryan Kreidler. Also,
this team is so weird.
Also, Alan Roden. Mm-hmm. So you're going to go into spring training with 18 hitters or 17 hitters plus Orlando Arcia, who is probably the backup shortstop, 3 catchers.
Yeah.
That's just weird to me. And so weird. when Julian gets shipped off, it's like, well, that would make sense. The guys that are out of options beyond that are Clemens, Altman, and Jackson. And you just traded and settled with Jackson. Like, they're going to carry 3 catchers. Is Jeffers DH when he's not catching?
There's almost like not enough inputs into this conversation to have it well. You know what I mean? Because like I just go around in circles saying like this person could do this person could do this. Like Caratini could play first base and DH in addition to catching. It sounds like the way they teed it up for Jeffers is, or plan is for you to catch 100 games, and Caratini much less. Which cool because he's not a great defender, but Jeffers isn't either.
I fit into this. Like he's unnecessary.
100% agree. 100% agree, and that's why I'm just like I can't make sense of it at the moment, and so I've stopped trying. Yeah, right. I've given up because all of these guys are so much on the periphery of what a high quality roster should be. And I get that having depth is important, but like one of these guys having a like one war season would represent a like resounding success. And I can't do the mental gymnastics for something that's going to be of that little value. It's boring.
It's at least not the freezing cold of outside, so that's why we do it.
This is true. So remains to be seen how the rest of the roster shakes out. We should also mention the Twins signed lefty Taylor Rogers as an addition to the bullpen. 1 year, $2 million.
It's their closer, man.
He's their closer, man. He pushes Cody Funderburk into the second left-handed pitcher role. I think creates a little more space and runway for Connor Prelip, who we're going to talk about in just a moment, because it's time for us to dig into top 100 prospect list. It is top 100 prospect list season, Jeremy. So here's what I thought we might do. We can kind of go through and list where Twins are on specific lists and kind of go through all of that. Get through all of that first. Then, if you're up for it, I'd like to go through one player at a time who's represented on at least one list and just talk a little bit about, we'll start with a summary of their 2025. And then like, what are their questions for 2026 and what kind of would represent success for that particular player. So we'll do a little bit of listing first, and then I'll get your kind of high level reactions before we dig in on individual guys. Okay. Quick summary. Deep breath. Inhale. Baseball America. 94, Connor Prelip. 74, Kalen Culpepper. 57th overall prospect, Emmanuel Rodriguez. And number 5 overall, Walker Jenkins. BA is the highest on Jenkins. MLB Pipeline had Emmanuel Rodriguez at 69. Eduardo Tait at 57. Kalen Culpepper at 52. And Walker Jenkins at 10. The Athletic, Keith Law had Eduardo Tait at 93, Kalen Culpepper at 82, Emmanuel Rodriguez at 57, and then Walker Jenkins at 11. And then Kylie McDaniel at ESPN, who I did note also released a 101 to 200 list today, which I thought was cool. There was a bunch of Twins on it. But he has Emmanuel Rodriguez at 97, Charlie Soto at 94. Theo won't be pleased to hear that. Kalen Culpepper at 79, Colin Prelip at 54, Eduardo Tait at 38, and Walker Jenkins at 9. So just obviously that's a lot of listing. That's not great to listen to. But Jeremy, like, what are your kind of high level reactions? Any surprises? Anything notable you took away just from like a quick scan of who's where?
Yeah. So I think last year around this time we talked about Jenkins and where he was going to be next year. Maybe we talked about 2 years ago where he was going to be next year, and he really hasn't moved, right? I mean, it was like if Walker Jenkins does what we think Walker Jenkins is going to do, he's going to be the number 1 prospect or the number 2 prospect or the number 3 prospect.
Yep.
And really, he's just kind of settled as like a top 10-ish guy.
Yep.
Despite the fact that he's advanced to the highest level of the minors at a pretty young age. There's just been other guys that have done it louder.
Yep.
Right. So that was kind of my first thing, because it's like, well, that's, I think 2 years ago we would all said, yeah, we would love if he was the number 1 prospect or at least the top 3. And so to top out at 5 right now, not necessarily disappointing, but it's like, oh, what else could we have done?
Yep.
Erod, I mean, he was a top 20-ish type guy.
Top 20, 30, yeah.
Yeah, we've seen him high, and so the high water mark on him right now is 57 twice, and late 60s once, and in the 90s. Yep. So we're talking about a guy that is a back half of the 100 at best.
Yep.
And if he is not right for a long stretch of the season, he will not be on a top 100 list.
No,
right? I mean, that's where we are with him, despite the fact that he's still young.
Yep.
Tait has to be good for this Duran trade to not feel bad, right? so misses BA's top 100 and then is 57, 93, 38 for ESPN.
Such a variance for him. So interesting.
But I think the reality is we've seen really, really good catchers. Ethan Salas, for example, not even like he's fallen. I mean, he was a top 10 dude. Like
he was
he's
9.
the answer, and now he's not there. So there's questions about like like his 90th percentile is very, very high. But if he's a poor hitting can't catch catcher, yeah, that's and there's a lot of variance for a guy that's 18, 19 years old. Culpepper is relatively consistent, but I think I felt like his numbers came in low, 152, and then others in the 70s. But if he engages with prospect rankers on Twitter, to me that helps his ranking.
Very entertaining.
And then Prelip makes just breaks it on BA's top 100. Is higher on Kylie's, but I think again that comes down to, and we've talked about this not here, but through texting. If he's a starter, that's one thing, and if he's not, that's a completely other thing.
Yep.
And if you view him as a reliever, he's not a top 100 prospect, and I entirely agree. So there's just a lot of variables and how this could go. But I mean, when you see guys, 4 different guys on or 3 different guys, I guess, on 4 different lists, that's pretty good.
Yep. Agreed. I think like 2 things I'd tack on to some of your first thoughts there, Jeremy. One is like, I think the big headline is something everyone knows, but it's worth just stamping. It's a system that's headlined by depth, not by impact. And that is fine because it's indicative of a player development system that can produce top 100 guys, right? So we'll take Culpepper as an example. You should never make an assumption that a guy who's drafted 21st overall in the first round of the draft is going to become a top 100 prospect. That's already a success, right? And the Twins have, I think, established a track record of taking guys who weren't necessarily like on track or expected to be top 100 prospects and making them that, which is a big deal. What we don't see is a Connor Griffin on this list.
Right.
Like, and maybe Walker Jenkins is obviously potentially the closest thing to that, but the way that small to mid-market teams can really go deep is if you can find a way to develop a superstar. So I'm thinking like Jackson Churio in Milwaukee, eventually Jesus Made, next guy up for them. The Twins only have probably one guy who fits that bill in Jenkins. And so my other kind of thought or takeaway before we jump into specific guys, to me, looking at these lists really drives home the importance of the draft this year. And obviously we're going to say that we're a podcast that talks about the draft, but there's a world in which Walker Jenkins, Emmanuel Rodriguez, and Kalen Culpepper all graduate this year. And it is sparse in terms of hitting prospects and like who's next up. Probably Gabriel Gonzalez is graduating this year, who might be a guy who's like probably in the 100 to 150 range on some lists, right? So after that, you're looking at Merrick Houston, who was just drafted. It would really behoove the Twins to nail this number 3 pick, adding a guy who is more like a 3 to 4.5 win player, hopefully, than a like everyday regular 2 to 3 win player over the course of the year.
Right. And that conversation feels different with Keishel's 23.5. But you look at the other guys that have recently graduated. 25-year-old Brooks Lee hasn't been great. Royce Lewis all of a sudden is dang near 27 years old. Like we've now passed the point where guys are usually like, or we're getting to the point where guys are like in their prime, and there's a lot of questions there.
Yep.
Even like Walner, Larnick, this is their age 28 season. Like these are not young dudes.
Can't
The
believe
young
Larnick's
dude,
still on the
the,
team.
the young dudes, Jose Miranda, gone. Eddie Julian, gone. Like these aren't young guys either, but we've really kind of like the wave went through and the next wave just hasn't come. And you said it perfectly. Like they're going to be few and far between once these guys graduate because the wave is here, and we talked about the weird depth. It's an interesting time for the hitters.
It is. But let's start digging in on some of these guys, right? So we'll follow this format. Quick recap of their 2025 season. And then I'm going to kind of pitch it to you, Jeremy, and ask, like, what do you think kind of constitutes success in 26? And then we might tack on some like specific developmental focuses that we think they might have. So I kind of went from guys towards the back to guys closer to the front, but there's no specific order here. But we are going to start with Charlie Soto. He appeared on just one list. I think it's a mild surprise that he's on the ESPN list because he really was limited in 2025 through injury. Only 13 innings pitched, had a bone spur in his elbow, had a procedure on that, I believe, in the second half of the year, working his way back through that. He looked phenomenal in the 13 innings that he pitched. However, at high A Cedar Rapids, 138 ERA, struck out 28% of hitters, walked just 7.5. All of that was better. Came in with a revamped arsenal, had 2 fastballs instead of 1. So a 4-seamer that had been a little bit criticized for being a bit dead zony, had added a sinker, slider, changeup. The control looked better. He'll be 20 basically for this entire season at high A, headlining a rotation with Dason Hill, which ought to be very fun. I guess any surprises that you saw him on a list, and then what constitutes success for Soto in 2026 from your viewpoint, Jeremy?
Yeah, I was very surprised because he wasn't really I mean I think he was on one list last year, maybe Kylie's.
It was, yeah.
And then didn't really pitch much. So he didn't do anything to solidify his ranking. And when you are out of sight, a lot of times it's out of mind. So I think the reality is that he's got to start this year in Cedar Rapids again, right? Like you're not just going to not do the league.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm looking for is health and be good enough at Cedar Rapids that you get to Wichita at some point. You don't necessarily have to be great at Wichita, but if you can get to Wichita at 20, we got a guy. And the only way that's going to happen is if he's healthy. So, he walked 33 and 74 innings in his debut, which isn't awful, but as an 18-year-old, but it's obviously not great.
Yep.
Walked 4 and 13 innings. So if he can strike guys out and not give free passes and just take the ball every 6 or 7 days, I think that's as successful as you could possibly get. Now, if he does more than that, great. And then that's the type of guy that's going to fly up the list. But what you want with pitchers, and it's going to sound like a broken record, just be healthy.
Yep.
And just make it to the next level. And then he could be, a top 75-ish guy.
I agree.
And even more. But yeah, 94, he wouldn't make my top 100, just out of fairness to the guys that played last year.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think that's Kylie saying, I'm trying to get ahead on Charlie Soto, who I view as someone who will be a slam dunk back end top 100 guy as long as he's healthy and throwing enough strikes. And the arm talent is undeniable, right? He was up to 101 at the complex last year before the season started. I think if you are proximal to Cedar Rapids or Fort Myers for any part of the minor league season, you're in for a treat in terms of the pitching that you're going to see, because both of those rotations are going to be absolutely loaded with some of the funnest Twins prospects in the system. So 100% agree. Just need health for Soto. I don't really think there are other questions really around like developmental focuses. It's like, what do the strikes look like when he's coming back from a lengthy spell sidelined? You nailed it. Let's move on and talk a little bit about Connor Prelip. Prelip is interesting if we're counting, because I'm a sicko. Prelip is prospect promotion incentive pick eligible because he appears on multiple of the necessary lists for such things.
Can you explain to our listeners what does that mean when Connor Prelip wins the Cy Young and Rookie of the Year this year?
Well, it means he'll get
What are the-
credit for full year of service time, and he would
Okay.
earn the Twins a pick if he met the requisite number of days on the active roster and you appear on 2 of the 3 heralded top 100 lists prior to the beginning of the season. Those 3 are Baseball America, Pipeline, and ESPN. Your team's eligible for a prospect promotion incentive pick.
Only one pick if he's Cy Young and
Yes, one. You only get 1 per prospect. That's a one-time deal, dude.
Okay.
But yeah, Prelip was healthy in 2025, was 24 for the majority of that season. Here's a fun stat for you, Jeremy. He pitched 82.2 innings in 2025, which is more than his previous 5 seasons of baseball combined.
Significantly more.
Significantly more. 403 RA, 354 FIP. He struck out 27% of hitters, walked just 8.5. That's really, really solid. Threw a lot of strikes, maybe a little bit too many strikes. Fastball, slider, changeup was how he entered the year. He added a sinker at the end of the year in St. Paul, so that was the 4th pitch for him. And what I saw from him was he got hit some, especially at AAA, and it was mostly from living in the zone too much. And so my thought was like thinking about how and when and where you leave the zone and get better leverage on hitters. But how are you viewing Prelip's ranking? Because we've got McDaniel as a high guy at 54. Then you've got another list, BAs, where he's sneaking on at 94. How are you thinking about his 2026?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of said it earlier. If you view him as a starter, this is where he fits in the back half. If you view him as a really good starter, which there were glimpses of this pre-draft, pre-injury at Alabama, that he could be a potential top pick in the draft. So I would love the idea of him continuing to be a starter. What the stat that you gave was the innings. He stepped on the mound 24 times last year. The previous 5 years or the previous 4 years, he did it like 18 times total. And so there's this feeling that every time he throws a pitch, like when I'd watch the games last year, I'd turn it on and I'm like, man, every time he had exited a game without shaking his arm, I'm like, this is great. And then so you wonder, like, does the team operate on, are we on borrowed time? Plus, this is age 25 season, so he's not young anymore.
Yep.
I would love the idea of him. We'll get you in St. Paul. We're going to start you. We're going to keep you on regular rest. We talked yesterday, like, in my opinion, at the max, like, he's still a couple guys down in the pecking order in the minor leagues. But what we've seen in the past years is, like, when you need a guy, it's more about who lines up with that start than being the next guy, right? And so I think he'll make his debut for the Twins at some point as a starter this year. I would guess they would try to run him out and still kind of limit his innings and pitches, and then kind of settle into the bullpen long term, unless he's just that good as a starter. And I think all of that is fine. I view him as the best Twins prospect in terms of his ability and how close he is to the big leagues. And I think he could be a starter on a team that needs him, but right now we know they need bullpen help. And I would love for him to stay healthy. He's going to strike out a ton of dudes and would be an absolute weapon in the bullpen. But if you can keep him stretched out and keep him going, I really like that for him. But I think this is fair, right? He's been healthy for 1 year and 82 innings of his career.
Yep.
And so there's a lot left to prove. And I think this is a great opportunity because there are pitchers that are decent quality pitchers. But I think what he brings with his left-handedness and his power and his off-speed stuff and his breaking stuff, like he's the real deal.
Yep. Yeah. So to double down on something you said there, right? He's definitely not ranked if people view him as a reliever already. And here's something I want to throw in the mix here about Prelip. On Baseball America's recent podcast recapping their top 100, they mentioned that they had heard rumblings of him working on an additional breaking ball this offseason prior to 2026. Now, if that's true, you're now talking about a guy who has 5 pitches. And that's the opposite of what I would be doing if I'm pigeonholing someone as a relief pitcher, right? If you're a relief pitcher, the most common course of action is, okay, what are your 2 best or your 3 best? Let's really get locked in on that, on those pitches and kind of optimize.
And we know the answer to this, right?
Right.
If Prelip's going to be a reliever, what's his arsenal going to be?
Fastball, slider, occasional changeup.
And he would be awesome.
Yep.
But that's not what we're doing.
So and that's a caveat, right? I don't know that for a fact, but I do know for a fact that they added a sinker at the end of last year, taking him to 4. So you're not doing that unless you are being flexible minded about what his role is going to be. And I think that makes a ton of sense. And the other thing I would throw in the mix with Prelip is just like there's a world in which he comes up and he starts in the bullpen. He makes his MLB debut as a reliever. That doesn't mean he's fixed in that role. And I think it would be smart for us to keep that in mind. Let's say they get him stretched out. He's pitching well in St. Paul as a starter. Having him be a reliever in the second half of 2026 for the big league team is actually a great way to manage his load and manage his innings in order to set him up for 2027 and beyond. So I'm obviously like the health and the history and all of those things point to the most likely outcome being that Connor Prelip is a relief pitcher at some point. I think we should pump the brakes a little bit on making that assumption now, because it sure doesn't seem like the organization is thinking that way. And it sure doesn't seem that folks in the industry are thinking that way. Otherwise, he wouldn't be as well represented on top 100 lists as he is.
Yep.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about Eduardo Tait, catching prospect acquired in the Juan Duran trade. Should I have listed Aiden Miller on all of these lists too? Because
oh boy,
he's in a lot of top 10s.
That's gonna be the thing that bothers you forever.
I need to, you know what I need? All I need for closure is to know if that is actually true or not. I don't know that for sure.
We'll
never get it for sure. So Tait, acquired from the Phillies in the Juan Duran trade, left-handed hitting Panamanian catcher, 19 years old for the vast majority of the season. He'll turn 20. He finished at Cedar Rapids. Combined, let's see, minor league numbers, 253, 311, 427, a ton of power. Does not walk a lot. Doesn't strike out too much either, but chases a ton. Chases everything. Still questions about whether he's going to catch. What there are not questions around is how far and how hard he can hit a baseball. So he's just a tough eval for me, man. Maybe it's just because he's the type of prospect who I don't love, which is like a super high variance guy who's like power reliant. I really like someone who has a good approach. Maybe it's just like a personal anti-bias. I don't know if you share that, Jeremy, but like, man, I see him at 38 on Kylie's list, and I'm like, that is aggressive for a guy who's played, what,
right,
37 games at high A. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, and I think you're exactly right. But at the same time, when you look at catching prospects around baseball, why wouldn't he be in the conversation as the best catching prospect in baseball? Right? There's arguments to be made that he's not. There's arguments to be made that he is. I mean, he's an 18-year-old that played high A. Like that, that's impressive. How good is he defensively? We don't know. Where is he going to fit in a batting order? We don't know. Like, he's not Joe Mauer. We understand that. But Joe Mauer at 18 was playing at Cretan. Yeah. Not in his third year professionally in America after coming from a different country. So I guess for me, like, he's going to start at Cedar Rapids. It's gonna be not great weather, and he's gonna do that to start the year. He's never probably been in cold weather ever in his life and played baseball, so it might take him a while. But if he can get to Double A and hit, I mean, well, he's at 259. 283 career, but in A and high A, 256, 259. I mean,
I'll take the under. But I'll take the under on 280 is what I'm saying.
Right. Yeah. If he can hit 260, 265 at high A and hit for a decent amount of power, not strike out in 30% of his at bats.
Yep.
Get to Double A where you're 19 years old and within striking range of the major leagues, like that's a win. What we can't see is a 19-year-old that struggles to hit at high A. And then what? Because that's the fork in the road, and it could go either way. And I think the ceiling is that he can be the heir apparent to Jeffers. But like I mentioned, with Salas, I can't think of another. There's a few catchers that have just kind of fallen off the face of the prospect landscape, and it's pretty easy to do. So it's a high risk, high reward thing, and I just want to see him succeed enough at high A to make it to Double A, because that's kind of this is the big test this year for him for sure.
I agree 100%, and it's interesting that you say that, because I'm on board 100%. Like, I feel like we often talk about how the step up from high A to Double A is this huge test and this bigger adjustment for guys, and that's true. But I think for Ty, like, you got a lot to prove where you're at, because he has been moved aggressively to this point in his career. He does get rave reviews from folks in the org about his power, his ability to hit all the things. So I like how you phrase that, Jeremy, of like, especially looking at the second half of the year, can he accelerate when it warms up, put up strong numbers in Cedar Rapids? That's going to tell us a lot about how long he's going to be able to hang on these lists with these other guys. I need someone to convince me on Eduardo Tait. So if you're listening to this and you're a huge fan, if you're like, yes, Eduardo Tait is the guy, let me know why, because I'm not there yet. Let's talk about Emmanuel Rodriguez, another guy with a lot of variance. We'll quickly recap his 2025 and 2024 and 2023, because they're all the same. He played in, let's see, 52 games, 65 games altogether last year. Performed extremely well. Walked 20% of the time, which is absurd. Struck out 32% of the time, which is also absurd. A 135 WRC plus. He has some of the best usable power in baseball. I think he's top 5 in prospects in all of baseball, like top 100 prospects in terms of 90th percentile exit velocity. It's such a weird profile. It continues to be, but the thing that it continues to impede him is health and staying on the field. So we don't need to belabor that. I feel like we've talked about it so much. You said it from the jump. If he doesn't stay on the field, he shouldn't be on top 100 list anymore. Here's my Erod take for 2026 that you can tell me if you agree with it or not. I think he's the most important prospect in the Twin system this year. Here's why. We talked a little bit about there's one guy who has kind of star power at the moment, and that's Walker Jenkins. Emmanuel Rodriguez is the only other candidate. He is a guy who, if it clicks, could hit 250, 30 home runs, steal 25 bags, and play center field decently in the majors. And so he's going to get a chance to make his debut this year. If the Twins want to be a team that competes in the next few years, it would be really helpful if he would approach his like 75th percentile outcome as opposed to his 30th, 40th, 50th percentile outcome. And so I just think he feels like a bit of a fulcrum because he's the only non-Jenkins guy at the moment who I can see like having like a 4-win season at the major league level. So I know you're not a fan and you never have been for both like the profile and the injuries, but what is your reaction to that? Like positioning him as like one of the most important guys this year.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And from the organizational standpoint, if the organization could have any confidence that Rodriguez or Walker could stay healthy, they don't have to bring Larnach back. I mean,
it's true.
The reality is that either one of these guys right now could be the starting left fielder or right fielder or potentially center fielder on a decent team. He's just missed so much baseball, but he does have the exciting profile about him. Like Gabby Gonzalez is kind of the opposite, right? Gabby Gonzalez is going to put up solid numbers and just kind of not wow you. And Erod is going to, I mean, even in not solid numbers potentially will do things that wow you, good and bad, right? It's going to be like,
sure.
Why did you swing at that? And then also, how did you hit that ball so far where it was? Like kind of very much Eddie Rosario-ish, right? With some different stuff going on, but he's, to me, that type of player. I hope he's more Eddie Rosario than Oswaldo Arcia, which is my concern. But if he's Eddie Rosario, you plug him in and he's your dude for 6 years in either corner, left or right field. Yep. And so that to me is kind of that I mean, it's higher than 75th percentile outcome. But if that's what happens, to your point, that's huge, absolutely huge for the Twins. And he had a good winter in the Dominican League. Like he did his normal stuff when healthy. That box though to check, is he healthy, just hasn't been checked very often in the last handful of years.
Yeah. That's super fair. I really like I can't say health aside because it's such a big factor with him, but a guy who's walking 20% of the time at AAA. I mean, that's so fascinating just from an on-base perspective. And the Twins just don't have someone like that really at the moment who's just such a pain and will just like sit there and look at all your. Keishel is a pain, but Erod is a next level pain. Like his strike zone judgment is some of the best of any prospect I've seen recently. His like eye for the plate is a little bit Juan Soto-ish. He's not Juan Soto. I'm just saying like the level of selectivity is similar. So
where does he best fit in a lineup? Is he best as a leadoff guy when you get on base that much? Like if you can get on base 42% of the time, you want that guy at the plate the most. Or is he like, is it Keishel, Erod if he's great, Buxton? Like, do you go right, left, right like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think they would use him leadoff because if he's like, there's just so much swing and miss, and he does have holes in his swing. And my worry is that major league pitchers will be like, you don't perform as well up in the strike zone. I'm just going to pound up there. And then he is a little bit of an automatic out until he figures that out. So I think like you're probably going to. This is true. I think you're probably going to have him a little lower down. I'm not like a lineup nerd like that, but I would guess Keishel is the guy who's going to be leading
My only
off.
point is if he can get on base at the major league level 40% of the time,
Yeah,
you bat him up towards the top
for sure.
because you want him on base for Byron Buxton and Josh Bell.
Yep. Yeah, he did get me a little bit back on board with his Dominican Winter League, just crushing home runs at Shea and all the things.
Just a tease.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about Kalen Culpepper. Drafted in 2024, 21st overall pick, one behind Trey Savage. Just like incredibly impressive performance in the minors so far. So he split time between high A and double A last year. If you want a good barometer of when guys are moved from level to level for hitters, it's usually around like 50 to 60 games. That's what we're seeing at the moment. His combined numbers, 113 games, hit 289, 375, 469, a 138 WRC plus, 20 home runs, 25 stolen bases, walked 10% of the time, struck out 17% of the time, played good defense at shortstop, has an absolute howitzer of an arm, whether he plays at short or third. I mean, like, sure, a back end of the top 100 prospect. I think, and we see a little bit of variance with him. I think for me, Jeremy, and like you can push on this if you disagree, and maybe I'm being a homer, I'd have him closer to 50 than 100, and some lists have him kind of more towards the 75 back end range. I just like, there hasn't been much to pick at so far. He did slow down significantly at the end of last year. There is a ground ball issue. His ground ball rate is above 50%. It's like exceedingly high, but he had that amazing production in spite of that. And so do we think he's being a little faded in the industry lists unfairly? I don't know.
Yeah, it feels weird because he did really struggle over the last month.
And was hurt, by the way.
But still hit 285, 827 OPS for Wichita. Like he was that good. He was that good when he started at Wichita. I guess my biggest question is, does he do time in Wichita to start the year, or does he come straight to St. Paul?
I don't think so. I think he's going to St. Paul.
Okay. So then, I mean, he's just got to stay sharp and ready because no matter how he performs, he's the call when Brooks Lee's back flares up. Like, right? Or is Arcia just the guy like that? I don't know. I'm looking for him to just. Is he a 2020 guy in the minors again? Do I expect to be a 2020 guy as a 23-year-old in the majors? I don't.
No.
But I could see him putting production up over 160 games where he hits 20 home runs and steals 20 bases potentially as he gets a little bit older. The other thing too is this was his first full season in professional baseball. So he played a full year at K-State and then did Cedar Rapids and Fort Myers to the tune of 26 games, but really only played 87 games that year, played 113 games, and got to avoid the hot Fort Myers heat in the afternoons. But it's kind of a grueling thing when you're doing that for the first time.
For sure.
He's gonna play for the Twins, and he's gonna do things that are like, oh, is he ready? Kind of like Buxton did for a year and a half.
Yep.
Or a little more. But as long as he shows that he can field his position of shortstop, you can live with all of the hitting problems because he can bat eighth or ninth. And then you just, as he's 24 and 25 and 26, becomes more of a player. So I'm less concerned about the bat and more concerned about can he stay stay at short, because that solves a huge problem for the Twins.
It does solve a huge problem, and I would add that like Twins have got plenty of problems to go around in the infield in general, right? Like defensively, especially. I mean, like, the word is Keishel's getting reps in the outfield, and like, do we think Royce Lewis is actually a really good third baseman, defensively or offensively? Meh. But I think
he's shown. Yes, he's also shown.
Right. there's variance there, right? And so I guess I think the thing with Culpepper, the determining factor for him staying at shortstop or not will be range. He definitely has the arm. He's definitely a really good athlete. He's good at making throws on the run. Does he have enough range to hack it at the big league level? I think I'd probably have him at shortstop defensively over Brooksley like today. But someone can show me the defensive model that tells me I'm talking out of my behind. But yeah, he'll be a Twin in 2026 if Kalen Culpepper is a productive everyday player, like a 2-win type guy that represents a big success from that draft and draft slot. Last but not least, dude, let's talk about Walker Jenkins. About to turn 21 and reach AAA as a 20-year-old, will spend the entire 2026 season as a 21-year-old, starting at AAA. His numbers across 2025, which was mostly AA and then a sprinkle at AAA at the end. He hit 286, 399, 451, a 135 WRC plus, 10 home runs, walked 13.5% of the time, super healthy, strikeout rate right around 20%. And you mentioned at the beginning, Jeremy, that kind of thought of like, oh, well, he's not like a number 2 or a number 3 guy. That's probably a result of like the tension, right? That he's been incredibly productive at every stop along the way, but he hasn't played enough games. Like, is it that simple? Is that the thing that's holding him back from being a top 3, top 5 guy in your mind?
Yeah, and the lack of home runs. Right? I mean, he looks like what you would expect a baseball player to look like. And he hit 10 home runs last year. Oh. And like that's the difference between, I like to make comps. Like, is he going to be Max Kepler that should hit more home runs but doesn't, right? Is he Joe Mauer who looks like he should hit more home runs and doesn't? And I think he'll develop a little bit into that, right? He's 20 years old. He's been dinged up with lower body stuff, and I think that will come. If he comes out in St. Paul and hits 3 home runs in the first couple weeks, it's going to be like, oh, it's time. And all the prospect heads are going to be like, yeah, he's the real deal. I don't know if he'll be healthy 2 weeks in the season because he'll have a ankle.
Yep.
And that's the problem. Him and Erod, like all of the roster decisions wouldn't have had to be the way they are if those guys were healthy. Like, what did they trade for at the deadline? A bunch of left-handed hitting outfielders. Like, Alan Roden doesn't have to be a guy they acquire. It's frustrating, but you need to kind of insure yourself because your center fielder that you want to run out there every day hasn't played a ton. Last year was healthy. The 2 guys that should flank him right now, if everything worked out from before, they haven't been healthy either. So that's kind of where the frustration happens. But I think Walker Jenkins, I mean, if things go well, he's coming up and he's playing by Memorial Day and hopefully never giving that spot up.
Let's go. Okay, that's the end of that. I guess my other question for you, Jeremy, that maybe we want to dig in on, and I think we'll save some of the listener questions for next week because we got some really great ones. So I want to give them like due attention. So those are the guys. Who are the guys who you're most excited about who are next up, right? So I picked out, and I think you would probably agree with me, like Dason Hill, Merrick Houston, and Riley Quick are probably the most obvious like next candidates in the system already that you would argue, ooh, I can see a world in which he's a top 100 prospect by midseason or the end of the season 2026. Which of those guys are you most kind of excited about and excited to see this spring and kicking off in the 2026 season?
So not to bag on Merrick Houston because I think there's a good prospect there, but like what's his game going to be? And I don't know that we're going to know right away. He's going to be very good defensively. Mm-hmm. How good's he going to hit? Do I see him as a top 100 guy in a year? I don't. The other two guys are just super high ceiling guys. And so Dason Hill is how big right now? 6'5" and 200 something. And like is the type of guy you look at and you're like, oh, there's projection there. And then Riley Quick is the type of guy you look at and you're like, he looks like a grown man right now. And what can he do? So there's also kind of the mystery because Quick didn't pitch. Hill's really young. I think that any pitcher that kind of accelerates through a la Corey Lewis or Zebby Matthews just gets your attention and ends up on top 100 lists. Yep. So if we see that from either of those guys, and I think Quick coming from the college ranks probably has more ability to do that. The Twins will treat their prep pitchers a little more with kid gloves. So I would think out of that group, Quick makes the most sense just, from his background of being a pitcher. And you see pitchers do that, right? You see pitchers fly up prospect ranks where unless Merrick Houston comes out and hits 340 with a bunch of bombs, you're just not going to see him make that jump. So names that I am interested in, Kendry Rojas, right? A pitcher we haven't really talked about that's probably on the would show up on top 125 to 175 lists. And I said Gabby Gonzalez wasn't real exciting, but dude hits. And if you keep hitting, you just hit your way into the majors. He's going to be at St. Paul. And he's going to hit, and it's going to be like, well, we need an outfielder. And while he's not the most exciting name, he's available because he's not hurt, and he's going to come up. And then I'm high on Quentin Young, right? The ceiling is high, the floor is very, very, very low. But if he can come out and perform at Fort Myers, like that's a name that people are going to take note of because of the family, right? He's got big leaders in his family, and he's a physical specimen, and he's got loud tools. So those to me are the ones that you take note of.
Yeah, love it. Loud tools is right. Excited to dig more into some of those guys, and we certainly will, because in the next couple of weeks here, we'll have our kind of competing top 20 list where we'll go back and forth. We'll probably give it a week or so before we do that, so we're not kind of repeating ourselves, but we'll put our top 20 lists up against each other, walk through them, debate some of the guys. We'll probably spend more time in that conversation digging in on some of the guys like just outside top 100. So your Dason Hills, your Riley Quicks, all of those type of guys, as opposed to the guys that we've covered extensively today. Thank you guys for sending questions. We got really great questions from Darren and Max and Corey. I'm going to push pause on those just for the sake of time today, but we'll fold them right into our show next week. Thank you guys, as always, for supporting the show. We super appreciate it. We will be back with episode 109, hopefully a week from now. Until then, stay warm, stay safe. Catch you next time.